Joe Biden has followed through on one of his campaign promises by canceling $10,000 of student debt for regular borrowers and then $20,000 for Pell Grant recipients. So that is a massive move that's going to affect many Americans' lives, millions of Americans' lives very significantly. So that's very exciting. And again, it is following through on one of his campaign promises, which is good as well. So let's go ahead and take a look at a little moment on CNN where they break down both the specifics of the cancellation and then some of the effect as far as how many people will be getting some sort of cancellation based on this.
In it, and who will it help? Now, look, this is $10,000 of student debt relief if you didn't receive Pell Grants and you're earning less than $125,000 a year. If you went to college and you received Pell Grants, right, these are low-income students, it's $20,000, trying to address inequality here in this relief. The forgiveness applies only if you're earning less than $125,000, and the student loan pause that has been since the pandemic, that will be done at the end of December. So January 1st, if you have student loans, you're going to have to start making those payments here again. So this is going to affect something like 20 million people will now have a zero balance on their student loans. 20 million people, 43 million people overall qualify in some way for all of this.
Yeah, a huge percentage of people who hold student debt have $20,000 or less.
That's right. And so immediately this is breathing space in the budget for those people.
Okay, so 20 million people will have all of their debt wiped out now, which is obviously very exciting for them. And we understand that college has gotten so expensive and college is really necessary for a lot of career paths and to make a significant amount of money. In most cases, there are opportunities outside of college where you do get really good careers. But for the most part, we know that college plays a big part in your ability to get good jobs afterwards. And so that's a place people feel like they need to go. And then you have to take on all this debt to do so. And so getting that relief is great. Again, also, it's following through on a campaign promise, which Biden needs to do, because one of the big criticisms of Joe Biden is that he hasn't gotten done all of the things that he promised. And of course, I mean, presidential campaigns, you're kind of saying as many things as you possibly can, that you have some sort of ambition to get done so that you can win over the hearts and minds of the American people. Maybe you're not completely thinking about the pragmatism in that moment when you're just trying to get elected. So we understand that happens, but still in a perfectly functioning kind of society, politicians would be honest about what they intend on doing and what they think they can actually get done. And so that's not the case at all. So often we see all of these beautiful things floated on the campaign trail, and then it comes governing time and we don't get it. And it's unfortunate in that situation. And so him getting some stuff done legislatively recently that's been very significant, the Inflation Reduction Act specifically, is kind of giving, a moment of relief to the people who voted for him because of the promises he made. And then he's following through on some of those promises, but not anywhere near what he did say that he's going to do. So this is one of those things he clearly said, I'm going to do $10,000 of student debt relief. And so him getting it done is significant and is good. And also, obviously, we're approaching an election, so it should help on that front as well. But most importantly, it'll just be helping Americans. So one of the questions that people ask whenever this comes up is this going to cause more inflation? Is it going to hurt our economic conditions as they currently stand? And that's been addressed by economists, and it looks like the consensus is no. It won't have significant negative effects. So, quote, reading from CNN. Am I reading from CNN? Yeah. President Joe Biden's student loan plan is a potential game changer for Americans drowning in debt. And yet the impact on the economy at large is likely to be so tiny that it will be hard to measure. Biden announced Wednesday that his administration will forgive $10,000 for borrowers who make less than $125,000 per year. Low-income borrowers who went to college on Pell Grants will receive up to $20,000 in student debt forgiveness. This debt relief will give tens of millions of borrowers some breathing room at a time when the cost of living has skyrocketed. Critically, the cancellation of student debt is being paired with a plan to lift the freeze on federal student debt payments beginning in January. We're getting to the economic effects here in a second. 2023. That means many Americans who haven't had to pay down student loans since March 2020 will have to begin doing so, eating into their cash flows, despite fears that Biden's student debt relief will fuel already crippling inflation. Economists say the combined impact will be minimal on the economy at large. Quote, the end of the moratorium will weigh on growth and inflation, while the debt forgiveness will support growth and inflation. The net of these cross currents is largely a wash. So because of the ending of the moratorium kind of coinciding in a way with this, it is looking like it won't have significant inflation effects because it'll kind of cancel out. And so people will get those benefits without a massive negative economic effect, or without even a notable economic effect in the wrong direction, which is good, because that is a concern. Whenever you give people at least not money in their pockets, but freed up, budgetary type value, where now they don't have to pay into these, be paying off their student loans anymore. They will have more money to spend, and that could accurately be a fear that would cause inflation in a time when we're already experiencing bad inflation. So economists believing that's not the case is good news, and I think is a further argument for why this was the right decision by Joe Biden. And so one other thing I want to show you before we wrap this up is he got asked on his way out one of the questions that is quickly brought up within this conversation often, which is, how is this fair to people who paid off their debts already? Which, before we show this clip, intuitively, it makes sense. You think, I know people give others a lot of crap when they say that, but it makes sense why that pops in people's heads. Like, wow, what if you busted your butt, you lived in a much worse living condition than you would have because you wanted to just sink all your money into paying off your debt and get ahead of it, and then you see other people get that paid off. I can see why that would be aggravating. I really do. Now, I believe this is the right decision because while we can't help everyone all the time and things aren't always going to be perfectly fair, that shouldn't stop us from helping some people. And I wish those people who possibly did get so burdened by way too high college costs could have had that addressed when they were dealing with that. But just because it wasn't done, doesn't mean we shouldn't forever in the future, if that makes sense. So let's look at Biden getting asked about that. And I like the direction that he takes his answer.
Thank you.
Mr. President, is this unfair to people who paid their student loans or chose not to take out loans?
Is it fair to people who, in fact, do not own multi-billion-dollar businesses? They see why these guys get them all at tax breaks? Is that fair? What do you think?
Okay, so he flips it around and pretty much makes the point that you're asking me, is it fair for us to help some portion of Americans when it doesn't apply to all Americans? And so then he compares it to, well, is it fair to all Americans who don't own, or, most Americans who don't own a corporation or something when corporations get big tax breaks? And I think that's a good kind of way to put it, even though it's not directly applicable. Obviously, what people's argument is in the case of student loan debt forgiveness is they're in the exact same situation. One person paid off, one person didn't, and the person who didn't is getting benefits from the government, and the person who did isn't. That's more, of a situation, I think, than corporations who are just not even applicable to the average person as far as why they're getting the tax breaks. Now, of course, I like the point of, hey, we do all of these big things. We're fine spending money when it's bailing out or cutting taxes for corporations. We're not whenever it's helping average Americans, oftentimes. So that point I love. And all of the time there's going to be needs within our country that don't apply to everyone, or that people dealt with and got through, right? That doesn't mean we don't address those needs. At some point, we got to start fixing problems. And even though a lot of people dealt with a world where those problems weren't being fixed, that doesn't mean that we just give up on trying to fix them now, if that makes sense. And so hopefully Americans generally support this. Usually polling shows that, but I'm going to be curious to see how people react after it actually got done. And then I'm super happy for all of the people that I even know, and then beyond that are going to feel some relief based on Biden's actions canceling this amount of student debt.